Hi, hello everybody. How are you doing? Hope you're having a great day, night, evening, morning, whenever you are. We're gonna start the stream in just a second. Hi, hello everybody. Okay, so this time I actually have some sort of an agenda, not a political one, but like a list of things I want to talk about. And yeah, I feel like we can start now. So the first thing I want to talk about, which quite a few people mentioned in the video and the comments. Oh no, hold on a second. How do you hear me? Can you like hear me well? Because I was experimenting with the volume to kind of counteract my shy voice and whatnot. And I'm wondering if it's like, if the loudness is okay. You are heard. That's great. Okay. Localhost, yes, because this is like a website served locally. I'm gonna talk about this in just a second. But first, Remotion is a tool for making animations programmatically that a lot of people compared Motion Canvas to. Random question, where are you from? I'm from Poland. You can actually check that in my About section. But we don't talk about that. Remotion is something that a lot of people mentioned in the comments, asking about how similar it is. And it's not, I don't really see similarities. I'm gonna talk about this in a little bit as well. But the main difference between Remotion is that Remotion is based on React. And React is inherently declarative. The way it works is that we define our components using a function. And this function is called each and every single time something is, I literally first heard of Remotion. I feel like there was a brand new video, right? By Fireship is their name, about it. So it's kind of, it's also a new thing, I believe. But anyway, this function is called every single time a frame changes. We get this frame from this custom hook, and we need to figure out what is the current state of our animation using this frame. Here's a very crude example of this. In this case, we are animating opacity from 0 to 1 in a span of 20 frames, but later here we have this helper function, interpolate, being used. And it's kind of, it makes it more clear as to what it actually is, right? Because at frame 0, we want the opacity to be 0. At frame 20, we want it to be 1. And this is conceptually the exact same thing as keyframes, right? We are saying that at this frame we want it to be this, at that we want it to be that. And there's no way to write imperative code here because it's React, and you know, the whole thing about React is that this is it's a declarative way of creating user interfaces. But I hope that, and I'm not saying that this is worse, right? Like I want to make it clear. It's just a different method of animating than Motion Canvas. And hopefully once Motion Canvas is released, you can see by yourself that it's, you know, different. With that out of the way, I want to take you on a quick tour of Motion Canvas's functionalities, because there are a few things that I couldn't show in the video because I didn't have the time. It's like local position versus world position. Kinda, you can think about this. It's like thinking about state as snapshots of state versus storing the delta, the change of state between states, right? This is like the declarative versus imperative way of thinking. Yeah, but the most basic features of Motion Canvas, of course, the playback control. You can play the animation, you can skip one frame forward, and this button here, I'll probably have to change it because currently it resets to the very beginning. It doesn't go one frame back, it goes to the very beginning. There's also looping. We can enable or disable audio and change the speed of our animation, but this is extremely experimental because it may result in some discrepancies between the normal timing and like slowed timing, but I'm still working on it. But you can see here that the mouse is now moving at quarter the speed. I'm sorry if you already answered this, but is Motion Canvas already available now on your top tier patron, or will it become available soon? It's not. I want it to be available in like a week or two. Definitely before the end of the month. But it isn't yet. The main thing I'm working on currently is making it possible to run it on a computer that's different than mine, because I kind of neglected this aspect. When I first created Motion Canvas, it was more of an experiment. I didn't have high hopes for it, and now it turns out that it's working and it's practical. So now I just need to, make it, how to put that, transferable to another PC, because it's gonna be an npm package, right? You're gonna install it using Node.js, using npm as a package, and configure your project. So these were the playback controls, and another interesting thing is the rendering settings. So there's this working range, which we can edit. Do you have plans on making Motion Canvas or any other side projects open source? I know I would like to poke around and possibly contribute. Yes, I stated that in the video. Motion Canvas is gonna be open source. The way my projects work currently is that they are getting released for patrons for at least a month as an early access, and then they're being made open source. And that's the idea with most of my projects, such as Typewriter or Reanimator is already open source. I haven't really had the time to work on it recently. But yeah, like the general idea for most of my projects is to not finally, but at some point make them open source. Thanks for linking this channel in a comment there. It was hard to find. I know, but I'm not really. It's kind of, how to put that. I prefer it that way. I prefer that there's fewer people here for now, because I'm still new to live streaming, and having more people there or streaming on the main channel would probably cause me death out of anxiety. Speaking of which, does the save system have a name? Yes, it's called Safekeeper. I actually named it recently, because initially it wasn't a separate Unity package, but now it is. Anyway, we can edit, because I'm rambling. We can edit the range that we want our playback to cover. And now, okay, maybe not in quarter the speed, but now if I hit play and it reaches the end, it's gonna loop back. And same goes for rendering. We can also change the frames per second to 60. You can see that this little box here shows us the current frame rate, and now it's 60, almost 60. It kind of oscillates between 59 and 60. And you could, and same goes for quality. We can increase the quality to like Full HD or 4K. I mean, you advertised the stream in the video, but didn't tell us where to look. I mean, I posted a community post, but fair enough. I'm pretty sure not everybody is seeing these posts. I'm gonna, how to say that? I'll try to make it clearer next time. I'm gonna say that the links may be in the description or something like that. I'm gonna state explicitly that it is on the second channel. Hi, bit of a tangent to the incredible core concept and execution, but is the gorgeous looking UI based on a framework or is it something you wrote completely from scratch? So the UI is a separate package written in Preact. Preact is like the simpler version of React, but I'm not using any sort of external like libraries for components and whatnot. So everything here is just pure React with my custom CSS written for it, which may or may not be a bad idea. So you're writing so many messages. Hold on a second. I know this is going to be outside of the scope of presentation, but personally I'm dying to know how the UI is implemented. It all looks very neat. I mean, there's nothing special about it, but we may take a look at it later. Is there any existing solution that is similar to Remotion canvas? If yes, why did you decide to make your own? Manim, if there is, like conceptually speaking, the most similar tool for animation, it would be Manim. I don't like Python. The answer is extremely simple. Like, I'd rather make my own tool in TypeScript than learn Python. It's like, I'm sorry, but like that's my real answer to that. But the problem with Manim, aside from being written in Python, is that with all respect to people who code in Python, okay, I want to make it clear. It just, for me, it doesn't click. My main problem with Manim is that synchronizing the animation with verbal cues is extremely difficult because you need to essentially guess the duration in code, as I said in the video. And my idea for Motion Canvas was to make my process faster than with After Effects. And with Manim, for me at least, it wasn't possible to make it faster. Is there a way to copy positions, sizes, etc. for helping twin one object to the position of another? Yes, you can access them. We're gonna take a look at an example. We're gonna take a look at this scene that's currently being played, the timing, in just a second. And I'm actually using that over there. So we're gonna see how it works. I did a Python project once with heavy generator usage. Your design reminds me of it. I was manipulating HTML elements. Was nice to just yield an element anywhere and yield to compose functions. Yeah, the whole like generator concept, I personally stole it from Unity, but I know that the other libraries using it, the Redux Saga is the name of it, is also heavily based on generators. It's a really cool way to describe how things change over time. Kind of topic, but do you think an imperative animation approach could be utilized in a games context as opposed to declarative keyframes? I mean, imperative animation. I feel like it could be used. Because conceptually it's more similar to like a physics simulation or a game than it is to an actual animation. Because you could do that with Unity, right? With coroutines, you already can do that very thing with generators. Like it's not called generators in Unity. It's called, in C# they are iterators, right? Enumerators, that's the name of them. What do you advise for those who want to go deeper into learning programming, and how did you get into the programming world? Okay, that's gonna be a tangent. That's sure thing, why not? I never know how to answer this question. The way I started programming was because of Autodesk Maya. Because back in the day when I was a teenager, I used to make Minecraft animations, and you don't bully me for that, but I was using Autodesk Maya, and in Autodesk Maya there's this language called MEL, which is used for, I'm not sure if it's still a thing, but it was used for scripting, different stuff. You could essentially automate certain processes. You could use Python, and you also could use MEL. And I noticed that when I was creating rigs for my animations, there was a lot of repetitive stuff going on that I could automate. And, I somehow discovered MEL, and this is how I learned programming, essentially. How I learned what procedures are, what are variables, and all of that stuff. And from there, it kind of moved further, because I was like, okay, I can automate the creation of a rig. What if I could automate the movement of a rig? What if I could just press keys on the keyboard and the character would walk? And then I was like, oh, that's just making a game. And then somehow if I recall correctly, my friend bought us an access to some sort of a website with tutorials. I don't remember, like Udemy, but I don't remember the exact name. And there was a Unity course, and I, used it to learn C#. And it's kind of I don't really remember because it was so many years ago. The most common entry to programming is finding a project or idea you want to do and Googling tutorials. It's so much easier when you have both motivation and interest. Yeah, there's something about that. But going back to the initial question, right? When I don't really have any resources to recommend or any way of learning programming to recommend, because I'm not using any, right? I'm not using any specific resources. I'm just, Googling stuff, reading articles, watching YouTube videos, experimenting. I really like reading through other people's code, especially Unity. The way I created Typewriter, for instance, was essentially by checking how the localization package was made, because localization package uses a lot of UI stuff that I used in Typewriter, and just seeing how they implemented that. So yeah, I know kind of disappointing answer, but I never know. I don't have any good recommendations. Did you go to any college related to programming? It's a very difficult question to answer because I'm from Poland and I don't know what is college. I don't know what is the analog of college in Poland. I went to a university. I got a computer science degree. It's a funny story because I actually got my first job as a software developer before I even started university, when I was 19 years old. So really, the university was like a side thing for me. So yeah, if college is somewhat like a university, then I went kind of to college. Speaking of generators, one of your earlier videos about Unity sparked interest in me to learn them, and video on motion canvas with the example of awaiting for an event was the second push I needed. I really like this whole generator thing. People are giving a lot of interesting recommendations for learning programming in the chat. Hello, found you fairly recently. Your devlogs are really good. Being much of a tinkerer and not actually doing much, this kind of stuff really gives motivation. I'm really happy to hear that. Is Motion Canvas open source? No, but it's gonna be. Give me 2 months top. Are you full-time on game dev? I'm gonna be making an official statement on that, but yes, I mean, I worked as a software developer and not in the game development industry, but I recently left my job and now I'm unemployed, so I can focus on making YouTube videos. But I'll be talking about it more probably in the next video. Hey, Motion Canvas looks awesome. It looks like you built it with React. Any chance that the output animations would be usable in a React website web app? Yes, so it's not built using React, but it renders everything to a single canvas. So if you can put this canvas inside of React and then display it on your website, you can do it. In fact, the UI is built using Preact, and this is exactly what I'm doing, right? It's a Preact, and the canvas is nested inside of the application, and it's currently being played. So like it's totally doable. Congrats, thank you. This is awesome. Good luck on your game dev journey. I'll be there along the way. It's really wholesome to hear. Thank you. Could you talk more about the video processing done in Motion Canvas? Do you use like FFS or something to build the video output? What is FFS? FFmpeg is what you're referring to, I'm assuming. So currently, the video processing is very limited because the way Web Codecs API works is, well, it's not ideal. It's really difficult to do like seeking to a specific point in a video. When it comes to the output, everything is rendered to a singular canvas, and then I'm going to show you this actually. So why not? So the way our project is configured is using an npm script, and you essentially give the initialization file that calls the bootstrap method and an output directory. In this case, it's right here, output explanation. And everything is rendered as an PNG sequence. There's no processing being done by the browser or anything like that. So that I can show you how rendering works. I just press this button, and currently it's being rendered frame by frame. And that's pretty much it. Because at least in my case, I'm still using Premiere to do like, the high-level editing on top of the animations. So I simply import it there as a PNG sequence. I'm even more interested now. I created a React MDX library to build slide decks and would love to embed these animations into it. I guess I'll have to wait for Motion Canvas to be open sourced. Yeah, like you can totally do that, especially since, as I said previously, UI is totally separate from the engine. So you can use only the engine and put it whatever you are, and it's gonna, display it to a canvas that you want it to display to. Do you render to video directly or only to PNGs? I notice Web Codecs supports encoding. Yes, but it's so bad, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's like my fault if I configure something wrong, but when I'm trying to use like, H264 codec, it's just like the quality is awful, and I try to do that. So like I'm looking up to I'm looking forward to making it open source. So maybe somebody's gonna figure out a better way of exporting this. But like I gave up essentially currently for now. Does that mean if you change a segment, you only need to render that segment? Assuming that you're not gonna interfere with the timing, yes. Let's say that, for instance, here, one of my patients, for instance, doesn't want to be included in the video and wants to remain anonymous. I only need to change the file from which my patients are imported and re-render only this segment, because the rendering starts wherever you are in the timeline, and it overrides the files as it goes. Why are you waiting 2 months to open source it? Because I need to eat, and my patrons are getting 1 month early access to my projects from now on. So they are gonna get the access first in like 2 weeks or something like that. And then a month after that, it's gonna get released as an open source project. Oh, that's really cool. Damn, so awesome. I mean, I guess it's cool. The motion canvas, of course, I mean. Okay, where were we? You're like getting me on all sorts of tangents. I was talking about rendering. Yeah. So currently, as you can see, I'm using, this is an interesting piece of information. I'm using 60 frames per second and 4K resolution, and it still can be played in real time. It doesn't really struggle with it, but the power consumption right now is through the roof. So I don't recommend doing that because Chrome is gonna really like increase your bills for electricity. That's why there's an ability to lower this. The render part of the video stage is done via canvas only, or you use other HTML elements? This is only a canvas thing. I'm using conva.js, which is this library for document object model for canvas that allows you to create these custom elements. I highly modified it, and I'm thinking about getting rid of it and writing something custom, but currently I'm using it. And that's pretty much everything that can be rendered is rendered using Canva. There's no HTML. Because the problem with HTML that I have is that you still need to use some library to convert HTML into Canvas if you want to save it. There's no other way to do that. So it's kind of like this extra step and then going back to Canvas again. And with Canvas, there are some things that you can do with a Canvas, like, you know, some advanced clipping. For instance, do I have an example of that maybe somewhere? This transition, for instance, is really easy to do from like one surface morphing into another because of clipping and how it works. And I guess you could try like overflow, try to use overflow in HTML to achieve a similar effect, but it's just so much easier with Canvas. Same with drawing arrows, for instance. Do you have a Discord channel? Currently, we only have a Patreon, a Discord server for patrons. I've recently read this article about how you're not supposed to make Discord servers for things that don't need Discord servers, and they mentioned like indie games over there. I'm not sure, like, let's be honest here, okay? How many servers are you currently in on Discord? If it's more than 20, then do you really need like another Discord server? I may need to make like a poll for this, because maybe actually people want a Discord server, but I don't think it's a necessity. One. I'll think about this. About 76. To 19.4. Okay, it's a whole range. What did you use to build the UI with? It's built with Preact. This is a simpler version of React. But I'm thinking about switching to Solid.js. But it's like I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of like a scope creep, because I don't really need to do that. But I don't know. I feel like it would be cool. It may be worth it to find another game dev you like to share a Discord with. That's an interesting idea as well. I'm in a few servers like specifically for game developers, but it's like there are only game developers there. There's no like, you know, a public persona in their community or anything like that. How long did it take for you to learn stuff like this? So I'm a front-end developer by trade, right? This is like my thing. So quite a lot. I'd say like 7 years, something like that. But it's also not that complicated. I want to be clear. There's a lot of things that you get out of the box if you use correct libraries for stuff. For instance, the hot reload with Webpack. It's so easy to implement and it just works. I just learned Solid.js and it looks neat. The only thing keeping me in React for my libraries is the huge ecosystem and the hope my leaves might get more attention. Yeah, that is a valid reason. Finally remembered what Manim and Motion Canvas and all this talk about presentations reminded me of. There was also Mathobox Squared, but it was heavily designed around 3D space and WebGL. I've never heard about this. I'm pretty sure MATLAB is also using WebGL, right? They're somehow rendering 2D graphics with WebGL, which is, if you've ever tried like render a circle with WebGL, you know how much of a pain this is. Did you mess with code-driven animation After Effects when you used it? Code-driven animation, haven't heard about this in After Effects. I used to use expressions and what's the name? There are these compositions that allow you to expose custom variables. I don't remember their names, but you can then have like multiple compositions differently configured and they look differently. This is as far as I went with After Effects. Because my main problem with After Effects is that my PC is not up to speed when it comes to After Effects. It's just, for me, just enabling like, you know, a grid in After Effects slows down the whole program to like 10 frames per second, and it's just... What university degree would you recommend for someone that wants to be a software developer, computer science, or software engineering? Well, I got a computer science degree, right? But I have no idea. I cannot recommend a computer science degree in Poland in my university because I've learned nothing over there. But you know, it may be different for like wherever you are from. I oftentimes say that throughout my first 3 months at my first job, I had learned more than throughout the entire university, and it's actually true. I'm not sure if it says more about the university or about my job. I can vouch for WebGL being a hassle. Yeah, exactly. I mean, when it comes to rendering 3D stuff, it's great, but there's something about 2D that's inherently like graphics cards were not made to render 2D stuff. From what I can understand, you treat the application as a game, specifically with the heavy use of Canvas instead of a web application. From a development standpoint, you would agree with that. I treat the application as a game. I'm not sure how to interpret that. I mean, if a heavy use of the Canvas API is considered treating as a game, then yes, I am. Does he read chat? Yes, I cannot do anything else because I'm reading chat constantly. I like how it's a channel about game development, but half the people in the chat are front-end developers. It's very similar if you think about this, right? It's developing things that people can interact with. What you've developed here is amazing, far better for what you're doing. If you have the hardware, expressions in After Effects can be super powerful, but this looks like the best of that refined to be beautiful. I need to check out this like what you're talking about, guys, about After Effects and coding with expressions, or however it was called. Hello, I'm super excited for the Astortion debugs. Hello, hi. Unfortunately, currently we're not talking about Astortion, but I'm really happy to hear that. Okay, moving on, because we're never gonna finish the stream. Yeah, this was the rendering. We also have the threads preview, and it essentially shows what I hate the word essentially. I say it so many times. I noticed that when editing the previous highlight. I need to stop. If I play this segment, for instance, maybe, hold on, I need to find an example of this. Oh, that's a great one. Currently, there's a lot of things happening in the same time. We have this pixel sweeping through the screen. We have these ripples and the patrons being displayed. And we can see in the threads panel that we have the main thread, which is the programming generator. And inside of it, there are 3 loop generators running concurrently. So this is kind of, for debugging purposes. What are your opinions on game frameworks versus full engines like Unity? I'm not competent to give an opinion on that subject, really. I'm making my first game, guys. I know next to nothing. I'm the last person who should talk about these things. The final tab here are properties, and that's something for the future. I'd like to, because you can select different things to kind of, see what they are made of. I'd like the properties panel to display all the properties of them. So like, position, scale, also for debugging purposes. It's not going to be editable. The idea behind Motion Canvas is that everything is contained within the code, except for time events, I guess. But time events are like a different beast. So the UI is purely for like displaying what's happening and not editing, in case you were wondering. Okay, so now I'd like to take a look at this one scene here called timing. This is the one where I have this little mouse cursor selecting these keyframes and editing them left to right. If I can find my IDE. Yeah, so this is the generator for this scene that I just showed you. Time events seem to overlap a lot. So they overlap because, I'm zoomed out, right? But I can zoom in, and then they're becoming a little bit clearer. So I'm not sure if there's a way to kind of fix that. And you can also, if you hover over them, they kind of, get highlighted, the entirety of them. Anyway, going back to the timing generator. So here you can see how the scene is defined. It's a surface, a linear layout, and a timeline. And a timeline is a component that I created specifically for this video. Have you built templates for common elements? Yes, for instance, the timeline. The timeline is this thing that you can see here in the background. It's inspired, the visual appearance is inspired by Blender. It's just, lines. Every other line is more transparent, and there are the keys at the top. So timeline is simply a class that extends shape, and shape is a basic class from Canva. And really, all I need to do here is create a scene function, a function called scene function, which is something that Canva will invoke whenever it wants to render our scene on the canvas, and render what I want to render. So here you can see this for loop is responsible for rendering the lines, and we're rendering the lines again, but offset it a little bit. Here we're rendering the playhead, And here we are displaying the text above the things. So it's like, if you've ever used the Canvas API, it's just the Canvas API being used here and nothing special. A very interesting thing here is this decorator that I created. I created both of these because Canva is written in JS, so it doesn't use decorators. I created them to make processes a little bit faster. So this decorator will turn this property into a getter setter, and then we can use it to set a value. So for instance, I have the reference to my timeline, and here I can say that I want the playhead to be at maybe not at 0.5, but at the 20th frame, right? This is how the setter works. If I don't specify any argument here, it's just gonna return the value to me. Something like that. And if you remember, maybe I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. If you remember from the video, I can set a value and then specify the twinning time. So for instance, half a second, and now it's gonna animate the playhead value. And I can actually show you that, I'm pretty sure. Here you can see that it goes to 20 and then it disappears. And it disappears because I cannot do that before the scene transition. I need to do it here. So now it's gonna go to 20 and stay here because I animated it this way. And this is maybe draw overlapping ones on a new line. Yeah, but there can be quite a lot of them overlapping, right? It depends on like how far away you are from the timeline. Is styling of the components in the video done with CSS, or is styling done in another way? There's no styling currently. That's remained to be figured out for the future. You can pass specific properties, like I can change specific backgrounds and whatnot, but I didn't want to, because I would end up implementing CSS, right? Essentially, this is debatable, I'd say. This is something that in the future we may, once the project gets open source, we can think about this. Because as somebody mentioned before, we could use HTML. We don't need to use Canvas only. Like this whole thing can work with HTML. There's no problem with that. I just didn't want to do that because I thought that it was too much for my needs. So maybe there's a way to do it better. But currently styling, there's no like unified way of styling things. How does it have a Bezier curve already? Where is that specified? Okay, so I can specify the interpolation here. So I can say, for instance, is in exponential, and this is a function, and a function that takes the value and an optional range, and it's gonna take care of easing. By default, it's is in out cubic. That's why it immediately, has this smooth effect, because that's the one I use mostly. But now, as you can see, it's the is in exponential. You can also specify a custom twinning function. It doesn't make any sense for numbers, but for instance, for position, I'm passing the rect arc twin function here. And what it does is that if you take a look at this mouse right here, it moves somewhere around here, but it doesn't go there in a straight line. It makes this like curve path. And this is what this twin does. Instead of interpolating the position in a straight line, it interpolates it in a curve. I noticed there's a lot of coordinates scattered through the code. When you design a visuals for a devlog, do you start with blocking it out in Figma or something like that, or place them from code directly from the get-go? Directly from the get-go, really, because with with hot reload, it's so easy to just like change the value, especially if you have like two monitors. You change the value on one side and it immediately updates on the other, and you can just like figure things out. Especially since these values are really not they are not absolute, right? They are relative to the center of the scene. So 160 is not 160 from the top, it's 160 from the middle. So it's, I don't know, I haven't found it necessary. So yeah, we can configure the interpolation here, but also this is just a shortcut. This specifying first the value and then the time, which uses a much more complex something called an animator. And I can access an animator for any property by passing the animate symbol here. And now what animator allows me to do is create essentially a keyframed animation. So I can say, I want this to go to 100 in a span of 0.5 seconds. Then I want it to go to 50 in a span of 1 second. And then let's say I want it to go back in a span of 5 seconds, and then I can run it. So this the simpler version is just like doing this, but with only one keyframe. And now if I save this, it's gonna go to 100 and then to 50 and so on, and then go back to 0, which is where I started animating. And just like before, you can control the easing here by specifying custom functions. So this is handy when you want to animate a specific property in like a sequence, right? Okay, so the way this animation works, let's start with the declarative mouse right here. We first have this mouse being moved over here, and then the selection starts, and then these keyframes get selected. Do you envision this ending up having a click UI driving the code at all? Well, yes and no. Okay, a tangent. Similarly how wait until works, what I was thinking about is that we could have something like constant position is equal to get position label, right? And this function, when called, it would create, oh, it's not gonna work because it doesn't exist, but let me comment this out. It would create like an UI interface for you to edit this position wherever you want. And it would feed back this position here to this function. Just like wait until does it with waiting for a specific time. So this is the only way I'd like to do this sort of UI-driven control, if that makes sense. But other than that, I'd like it to be, code-oriented without any UI clicking and stuff. Does motion canvas support the backpropagation of events so it times to finish on an event, or is that not worth it if you can draw it to line up the end? I understand nothing. Could you please try to rephrase this a little bit? What do you mean by backpropagation of events? It times to finish on an event. Do you have a GitHub? Yeah, you can go to my to this channel's page, and there's a link to GitHub. Can animations finish on events rather than start on an event? Well, thinking about this. Currently, no, there's no way to do that. I mean, what you could do not really. I'm thinking about this right now. Maybe it's possible, but no, currently not. To use time events to specify the duration and not... I like this idea. I'll have to think about this, but currently no, currently it's not possible. For future streams, maybe, I don't know, I'm neither streamer nor YouTuber, but I suppose it will be easier for you if you don't look at chat while you are talking about something and make pause in between. Yeah, that's the thing. I'm not a streamer, right? I'm a YouTuber. I have no idea how to do that. But you're right. I should stop going on tangents. We were talking about this timing function, this timing generator. So, the way it works in the code. We start by waiting for the declarative event. We then oh no, it's not here. We start by waiting for the declarative mouse event, and then we animate our mouse to move to a specific position. We wait for another event. We start selecting. We make the mouse appear a little bit smaller to simulate this sort of a click. If you take a look at this right here, it becomes smaller to kind of indicate that, you know, you're pressing something. And then we go to another position, we stop selecting, and for every keyframe we just add a stroke width to make it appear like it's selected. So it gets selected here. And then we return our mouse to like a normal scale. And this is, I really like it, right? Because it literally expressed what the animation does step by step. Mouse is another component that I created aside from the timeline. And it's also really simple. It has this code for rendering the selection square, which is this, and then this code for rendering the mouse itself. And that's pretty much it when it comes to the mouse. And then it has some like useful methods like start selecting, which just sets this flag, and stop selecting. And then when it comes to the sliding of these keyframes, which happens here later, it's like they get slide to the left and right. So where does this happen? This happens right here. After we selected our keyframes, and this is, somebody asked about that. I'm getting the position of the keyframe at the 30th frame, which is this yellow keyframe, right? Because it's right here on 30, on the frame 30. I'm saving this position as a variable, and then I'm moving my mouse here and creating this little thing. So use animator allows us to use the animator that I showed you before, the one that, you know, allows you to call key and then run it. It allows us to create us not for properties on an object, but for any function we want. So we start with the default value of 0, and then this function will move the mouse to the right and to the left, depending on the value, and move the keyframes to the right and to the left. Because slide keys, if you take a look at this right here, slide keys is the group of these 3 keyframes, which we can slide left and right and left and right. So after we created something like that, we can call it and then use the same interface as the animator uses to make it go, you know, to the right by 100, to the left by 100, and then back. And this is exactly what is happening right here. Right, left, and back. And then of course, once it ends, we deselect the keyframes and make the mouse appear normal again. So hopefully, after like seeing kinda how this works, a scene like this, you can tell the difference between, for instance, Remotion and other tools that are based on React. Will some of your pre-made visual elements like the mouse or timeline be included in the project? I'm still thinking about this because I don't know how to. Perhaps yes, or maybe they're gonna be released as a separate NPM package. So the main package is not gonna contain them, but there's gonna be a separate package with just my custom visual elements. I guess it could be a community effort to develop components libraries for it. Exactly, because you don't need to use my components, right? You don't need to use my style of animation. You can do your own stuff. Okay, I'd like to go back to this custom timeline. Oh no, actually I talked about that. I talked about these decorators that allow me to create getters and setters immediately for specific properties. Are you planning to ship Motion Canvas through NPM? Yes, I even reserved the name already so that nobody can steal it. It's gonna be released on NPM, yes. Is there an indicator in the line count area of the code editor to show you where your timeline is? No. So the way I work around this problem is that I have time events, right? And time events have to be unique. So if there is a time event called imperative, I can simply like find it here, right? And this is like, I use time events to kind of see where stuff is happening. I'm not sure if it would be possible to like, maybe it would. It's an interesting idea as well. Interesting, I expected something like an Electron app for some reason. It's like Electron app is literally just like the Chromium without the UI, right? So it could be ported to Electron, but I'm not really convinced as to the benefits of it. I don't see the benefits, is what I'm trying to say. Aside from the fact that it would be separate from Chrome, right? If you could make the playhead dynamically comment into your code as it moves, but the playhead cannot edit the code. That would be kind of against the idea of this whole thing. Like I don't want the GUI to edit code, right? That's kind of the opposite direction. I actually saw a project for Manim that did exactly this, like generated the code for Manim using a graphical user interface. But this is like, in my opinion, going circles at this point. Would it maybe be more clear if you had the line of code in the Motion Canvas editor instead of vice versa? Might be easier as well. I do not understand what you mean. What line of code would I have in the Motion Canvas editor? The line of code which... I don't get it. I'm sorry. Next, we need an interpreter to convert After Effects project files to Motion Canvas projects. Exactly. It's the only way to do that. In the timeline, if you showed the line of code which contributes to each event or something like that. Yeah, I mean, as I said, it's an interesting idea, but I'm not sure if it's possible to do that. Maybe it is. Maybe it is, right? Because I could technically... I could access trace right here and I probably could get, you know, the current line using it. Okay, but okay, console trace doesn't return anything. It just logs the trace to the console. But yeah, it's probably doable. I'd have to take a look at it. Including code editor means playing catch with IDE, and in the long run is so much work, but displaying a line that's currently being executed is probably relatively easy with a stack trace. Exactly. If I figure out how to get the stack trace as an object, then I'll implement this. If you want to integrate with the IDE, you possibly could just use the existing JS debugger, set a breakpoint on a line to stop there. Yeah, you can do that. But I feel like what they mean is an ability to easily, you know, find the place in the code where something is happening. New error stack. Oh, that's interesting. Hold on a second. There's no such thing. New error stack. Oh, stack, not trace. Okay. But this is I'd have to process this string. But yeah, okay, this is doable. That's cool. Okay, I'm gonna keep that in mind. Okay, so now we can take a quick look at the core of Motion Canvas and how it works, if that's interesting to you, hopefully. So Motion Canvas is, and I'm probably gonna refactor a few things. Keep in mind that this is a very, like, you know, MVP kind of thing. I'm curious as to how the clicking the timeline can instantly jump ahead to the desired frame. Does this have to run the generator functions up to that point, or does it skip ahead somehow? Short answer, yes, it has. Longer answer, I'm gonna get to it in just a second. So the main class here is the project. Project represents the entire animation, and for some reason is being highlighted here. Ignore that. It's not supposed to be here. It wasn't there. It's probably because, hold on a second, let me open this in like a separate IDE. Yeah, okay. It's not a problem here. For some reason, the IDE probably couldn't parse that correctly. So project is this main scene, this main class that contains scenes of our animation. And it's responsible by running the animation as well. So it has methods such as the most important one, the next method. And the way the next method works is that it keeps track of the current and the previous scene, because there can be two scenes running at once when the transition happens. And it calls next on these scenes. And the next on the scene class represents an individual scene. And here, the runner is the main generator function. And so what's happening here is we're calling next, we're checking the result. In case the result is a promise, we await for it and we yield it back. This means that we can, hold on a second. This means that we can, for instance, do something like, we can do something like this. We can yield a promise, and Motion Canvas will wait until it resolves and then assign it back to this value. if there's a need for something like that. For the reason why I implemented this was because 3JS, which is a library for 3D stuff, has a lot of asynchronous code in it, especially when you load textures and stuff like that. So you can totally do that. And yeah, it just runs the generator once. So up until the next yield statement, updates the layout, and that's it. And then we can call the draw method on the project. Not on this project. Hold on a second, because this is a scene. We're gonna call the draw method on our project, and then just draws it on the canvas. And player is responsible for playing our animation. So this is how it works. This is the heart and soul of the playback. There's this one huge method which may or may not, should or should not be simpler, but it runs it takes care of, you know, where we are in the timeline, where we want to be, what are the ranges of the timeline, is there audio, should it be synchronized with audio, stuff like that. And it uses the request animation frame to call it every single time something should be re-rendered. And when we seek, so the way we seek is by calling this method, not this one, request seek. This says the seek command, and the next time run is calculated, we can see that we access these commands. And seeking is happening here. So if the seek is greater than 0, we call seek on project, and as I said before, the way it works, it's essentially iterates. I can show you actually. It figures out if we are in the correct place, because there's a lot of, I'm gonna get to that, hold on a second. But in the essence, it just does a while loop until it reaches the time we want. So going back to motion canvas, I'll show you in console here, because I'm actually logging the seeking time. When I go forward, you can see that seeking takes approximately 1 second, 6 seconds, because seeking forward is extremely fast. We just continue the animation. The problem happens when we want to go back, right? And here you can see that seeking back is a bit slower, especially when you're at the end of the scene. It's like 23 milliseconds here. So the way it works is that motion canvas goes back to the very beginning of the scene and simulates it up until this point. New error line number exists apparently, but wouldn't it log the line number of the line where the new error was created though, right? I need to be in the call stack, I need to be one function higher. Okay, never mind, I'm tangenting again. I digress, is how I should say that. So it may seem like it's kinda not particularly performant, right? Because we need to simulate this. And I agree with that, it is. It's a silly idea, and this is why I thought that it's not even possible to do that. I thought that it's just not gonna, work. But even with longer scenes like this, still seeking is 32 milliseconds. And I had really complex scenes, don't get me wrong, where seeking backwards was taking 500 milliseconds. But still, 500 milliseconds is not that huge of a deal, at least from my experience. Do you have a Discord server? No. We have a Patreon-only Discord server, and we were talking about creating a Discord server for everybody before, during this live stream. But to reiterate, I'm gonna think about this. I'll call you back. No, I'm actually gonna consider it. I've been considering for quite some time, actually. If there are any patrons in the chat, they may confirm that I was actually talking about that on our server, about making our current Discord server available to everybody. I wanted to ask about possibility of adding spring physics earlier, but decided not to because seeking jumping across the timeline and rewinding would become very tricky compared to timing and easing functions. But you can add spring physics. You can simulate spring physics with, you know, velocity, acceleration, and all that stuff. Common or face? It's like, is this a Twitch thing that I don't understand, guys? I don't speak Twitch. I'm sorry. Anyway, I'm getting distracted again. Oh, and interesting thing about this whole seeking process is that you can see this little scene right here. It fades to black, and this is because there's a transition happening. This like slide up transition, and this is to indicate that there is this transition. What's gonna happen if I seek here is like motion canvas is gonna ignore this whole scene on the left to kinda save on space, and it's just not there anymore. Even though if you go here and go one step further, it is there, right? And it's gonna animate hiding down, but if I seek here, it's no longer there because there's no point, in my opinion, right? It's just unnecessary computation. So that's just like one of the caveats. It's not a caveat because it's really easy to fix. It's a design choice. I'm gonna call it that. Yeah, and that's pretty much the basic structure of classes. You have projects. You have one project have scenes inside of it, and the player is responsible for playing the project. And the idea is that project is totally independent from the player, so it doesn't know that it exists, essentially. Player is this like master class here, which means that you can write your own and, you know, change how this whole thing is. For instance, one cool thing that could be done is create a simpler player that doesn't account for seeking and whatnot, and just like display the animation just moving forward, and that's it. Create a simple player like this. If you wanna, for instance, embed the animation on a website. Is it possible to write the code inside Motion Canvas, or would I need to use IntelliJ or Sublime or something? Somebody else said that before, like, I don't think having an IDE inside of a tool is a good idea, especially nowadays when the current tools are so advanced. It's like my main, how to put that diplomatically? My main issue with Godot, for instance, like I don't understand why are they having an in-game engine editor specifically for Godot instead of just like, you know, focusing on other things. But it's just me ranting. And then moving on, I'm getting lost in the project because I have two IDEs open. Another important function is the bootstrap function. This is the one that we call when we set up our project. And it's essentially responsible for, I keep saying essentially, it's responsible for making the project and the player, and then exposing this player as a global variable. And the reason I do that is because the UI is totally separate from that. The UI doesn't know about all of this happening here. It just accesses this player, this global player object, and uses it to create the UI, which again means that you can create your own UI if you wanted to. And this is also where the like hot module replacement is registered as well. So if you don't remember or haven't seen that, the bootstrap function looks like this, right? I create the file and call it with the name of the project, the scenes, and the audio if I want. I don't need to, but I can. The audio is the source, the meta, and an offset. This is one of the problems currently. The meta for the audio is essentially the data, I keep saying essentially, the data about the volume of the audio that's used to display this, however you call that, waveform preview. I couldn't find a way to generate it easily in JavaScript. I believe that there is on the browser side. You can probably do that somehow. But currently it uses a custom Webpack loader that generates this data. And it uses an executable file. So that's a problem, right? Because it's gonna be difficult to transfer this to a Linux machine, for instance. But that's one of the things that I need to iron out, as I said. Essentially is a good word. Yes, but not if you say that in every other sentence. It loses its meaning. Okay, so this is the general structure of the project. We can now take a look at the UI if you want to, which I'm not proud of. It's not my best creation. Which programming languages do you use? Currently TypeScript in this project. I write C# in Unity, and that's pretty much it currently. I know I've been using C++ with Unreal Engine for some time. I also know a little bit of Java. Rust. Rust is this language that I really want to learn, but I never have the time. But yeah, my main languages are TypeScript and C#. So the UI is like the most typical, React Preact UI. We have the application. The application consists of a resizable layout, of 2 resizable layouts. These layouts are the things that, allow us to adjust these like that for some reason, because it's necessary. And then inside of it, we have the sidebar, the viewport, and the timeline. The viewport, I can show you the viewport because the viewport is the interesting part here. The view right there. So what the view does, it finds the container for Conva, which is this like HTML element that contains the canvas, and then using useEffect, I just append this Conva container inside of this Preact application. I'm not sure if there's a better way to do that, but this one works. So I have this viewport reference. Where is it? Right here. And inside of this div, the Conva container is going to be nested, right? I can show you that in code if you want. Right here. So this is this viewport, and then inside of it is the Conva container. So like somebody was asking if you can nest it in a React application, you totally can. And then on top of the viewport, we have some debugging features such as the grid and the debug. Grid is this thing, which I can enable, and I try to align all of my elements to a 80 pixel grid. And this is essentially it, right? But of course, when I zoom in, it gets more and more divided. And the debug is, the ability to select different objects and see their margin and padding and width and height. And this is the origin. Can motion canvas draw with pixels like a shader, or is it mostly object-oriented? You'd have to take a look at the Canvas API. You can, I'm pretty sure you can set specific pixels, but you can also use WebGL to just use like a full screen shader and output it on on the thing. How do you render the animation to a video? We already covered that. You can like go back and see. I talked about how the rendering works at the beginning of the stream, but it is essentially rendered to a PNG sequence. I'm not sure if there's anything interesting here. I mean, the grid is pretty cool. If I can show you that somehow. What if I divide it? Oh, but I'm not using the UI version. Give me a second. We're gonna switch to the example project. Oh, is something wrong with it? No. Oh, so now we can see that the grid is really just like a simple shape, not a shape, a path duplicated twice. And it just moves wherever you are to kind of keep on with you. And as you zoom in, it gets, you know, smaller and then bigger. But because if it's a little bit bigger than the screen, you never see that. But I feel like it's pretty cool. It's like I use this in a lot of places. It's kind of like infinite scrolling, if you think about this. The same thing happens with the timeline, right? Obviously, when I zoom in, there's more and more times being visible, but as I zoom out, they disappear. So it's just built on top of the Canvas API. Nice. I'm used to dealing with that in JavaScript. Can you use JavaScript instead of TypeScript? Is that an option? Yes, you'd be able to do that. Because the package is gonna be, you know, compiled to JavaScript or transpiled. And, you know, the typings are gonna be generated and this is gonna be uploaded to NPM. So we can use it with JavaScript and with TypeScript. Wanted to ask that the recording of this live stream will stay on the channel, right? Yes, this channel is specifically for keeping the VODs or the VODs of these streams. Rust is pretty cool. BV engine looks cool, not gonna lie. I'm waiting for it to be like a little bit more, you know, mature, and I'm definitely trying it out. I love the idea of writing a game in Rust. But it still feels a little bit early. 0 FPS because it's a code block that doesn't move. No, it's 0 FPS because it's not playing. FPSs are count only if you're playing. Because it shows you the real time, right? If motion canvas cannot keep up, it's gonna drop the FPS here. I can show you how the rendering is done, but the rendering is not refactored yet. Everything is this like one sidebar file. I'm gonna extract this later. But if we take a look at the player, which is right here, you can see that if we enable rendering on the player, and we do that by calling toggle rendering, it's gonna enter this like special block is the word I was looking for, and it's gonna dispatch an event containing the blob of this canvas and the current frame, and then our rendering registers this callback here on the player. Whenever render happens, we take this data and we send it to Webpack. And this is the best way I could find to achieve this sort of things, because I was trying to use the file system API from Chrome, but it's so much slower than just sending the data. And then on the Webpack side, there's just this middleware that, you know, reads the data and pipes it back to a file. And this is what creates the rendered images. Can you grab the elements in the canvas and move them, or just by code? Just by code. The idea is that you're not meant to edit stuff in the canvas, except for what I mentioned before. But you can scroll back in the live stream, because I talked about this in a bit more depth before. But currently you cannot. Have I showed you the JSX runtime, now as I think of it? I actually cannot remember, because I was practicing before the live stream, and now I don't know if it was live or not. But if you don't know, tell me if I'm repeating myself. But in TypeScript, there is this cool option to transpile JSX into JavaScript. And one of the ways it works, which is this one, the new one from like React 17, it takes this XML syntax and it turns it into a method call. But the beautiful thing about this is that you can specify what method you want it to use and where should it import it from. So here I'm specifying my custom JSX runtime, which is a function called JSX, and it's responsible for creating the objects. Right, so it handles if it's a fragment, if it's a function, and then if it's a class, it instantiates it and then adds the children. Don't look at this. This is gonna be changed. It was an experiment. Looks awful, and handles references as well. So this is if you didn't know that, I was surprised learning about that. Because it just. At first, I didn't want it to do that because I was like, oh my god, JSX is probably so complicated to implement, but it's just like literally one function. And then in TypeScript, you configure this as the JSX import source, and that's it. How do you export from Motion Canvas? Can you export at certain FPS? Again, we talked about this. I export to a PNG sequence by pressing this button. You can change and choose custom frames per second that you want to render in. Right, this is pretty much everything I wanted to show you today. I'm not sure if you have any questions, then feel free to ask them. What would you say is the weirdest feature? Very interesting question. I don't think there's any like particularly weird. I think the looping option is weird because I never use it. I always have it on because what it does is like if you have your range like this, for instance, once it gets to the end, it's gonna loop back to the beginning. If you disable it, it's just not gonna do it. But I don't know. I never use that. I just added it because other tools have it. Stream is going to be saved on the channel. Yes, Yes, always. This will always be the case. That's what I'm trying to say. And the thing about YouTube is that it may not show up immediately, but there's a playlist on because it may act as an unlisted video for a bit, even though it is public. But there's a playlist on the second channel called the Livestream Archive, and it's gonna be there. So if you have trouble finding it, it should be available there. The loop function is great if you want to spot a specific error in an animation. I mean, you mean having it enabled, right? I think if that's what you mean, then I agree. Because what I'm saying is that I always have it enabled, right? And I don't get why it's even here. When will you be making this available? My patrons will get an access to that in like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, before the end of this month, and then a month from there, because my patrons have this like 1 month long exclusive access to my code, it's gonna be released as an open source, unless there are so many problems with it that I'm gonna spend more time working on it. Time to become a patron. Oh, you don't need to do that. It's like a month of of waiting. I don't think it's that long. So I'm thinking about improving seeking performance. I don't know enough about inner workings of Motion Canvas to make the judgment. Is it possible to take snapshot every once in a while on the first pass so you can reuse them when rewinding later? No, unfortunately, because they are based on generators. You cannot make a snapshot of generators. To the best of my knowledge, I'm happy to be proven wrong. If there was a way to like create a copy, in-memory copy of a generator, this would be a game changer, but I don't think it's possible. Can you do a particle generator? You can do everything. I'm thinking about how I do that. You can even make use a particle system from Three.js and render it onto the canvas, right? So I'm pretty sure that Three.js has a particle system. Okay, that's not. I thought it's gonna be some sort of documentation, but this is gonna mess up with the bitrate. Anyway. Will patrons have to wait for the month to get our hands on the code, or is there some fancy GitHub patron integration that would let us access the code with it isn't open source? I'm currently researching that because I'd like to, if there is no integration with GitHub, I'm gonna do that manually because there's not as many compute patrons to not be able to do that. I need to do a research on that topic because I ideally would have like a private repository, and patrons would have an access to it. That's the best way, because sending source code using a zip file is not the best idea. The only limit is imagination. Exactly. But going back to the snapshots and improving the performance, one thing I was thinking about, if we get to the point where previewing, for instance, previewing or playing the, excuse me, I don't know how to speak. If we get to the point where playing the animation in real time becomes impossible, I was thinking about caching the preview like After Effects does. Because that's something that we can do with Web Codex API. We can store the pre-rendered preview of our animation and then use it instead. Somebody even mentioned that in the comments under the video. But that's for the future, right? Like I was really being very strict when it comes to the functionalities in Motion Canvas, because, you know, it's really easy to think about this and spend a year developing it. There's so many possible things that you can implement. I'm happy that I was able to do that in like, what, 2 months, I think. 3 months top is how long it took me. If caching is enabled, won't Chrome eat all my RAM? Isn't Chrome already eating all your RAM though? That's the question. Yeah, it probably would, to be honest. But then again, After Effects, at least in my case, After Effects does the same thing. Like, I'm using After Effects, I'm taking a look at the, what's the name of it? The task manager, and the task manager is like, hey, 10 gigabytes of RAM is being used by After Effects. I'm like, what for? What is it doing? Are you excited about having to write documentation in preparation for the release? What is this emote? I actually am. I like writing documentations. In my previous job, I really like doing that. So yes, it's gonna be a lot of examples. I really want the documentation to be like good, if you know what I mean. What do you think about Fleet at JetBrains IDE? I've never heard about this. Wait. Is it an analog for Visual Studio Code? Is that it? Yeah, it is, right? In that, I mean that it's created using web technologies, if I remember, because I remember reading about something like that. It's open source as well, right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's that. Source code. Oh, I can press these. I thought these were buttons. It's VS Code, but much better. Well, I'll perhaps I should give it a try. I'm so used to like the classic JetBrains IDEs. I don't think if I would be able to switch from like WebStorm. For free. Is it for free? This is the question. Why is there subscribe to updates, but there's no like download or like buy? I don't get it. Misleading web design. You can subscribe to updates. Okay, Fleet is still under very active development. So does this mean that it's not released yet? No, I don't get it. Guys, please, somebody answer me. Oh, it's not released yet. Okay. All right. That makes sense. So interesting. I'll be looking up to this. I'll be looking forward to this. What IDE do you code in for Unity? Well, Rider, obviously. Rider is a JetBrains IDE for C#. How long did it take to make this? As I said before, around 3 months. From like the initial idea, initial prototype, up to this point. Do you host your own Bitwarden instance? This is a security question, and I'm not gonna answer it. No, I don't, actually. Fleet will be a commercial product with fair pricing that reflects the value it provides. So the question is, if I already have the like package for every single IDE that they have, is it gonna include it out of the box? We'll see, the whole fleet thing. I really thought it's gonna be like Visual Studio Code, open sourced and free to use. Please finish Astortion now. No more side projects. See you on your Patreon. This is not a side project. I mean, it is a side project, you can call that. Like, that's the thing, because I got quite a few comments about that throughout my career. It's like people, not only about Motion Canvas, but oftentimes people are like, well, cool video, but maybe you should focus on developing the actual game. And I'm like, guys, a person can have more than one hobby, right? Just because I'm developing the game, it doesn't mean that I spend my whole free time developing the game. YouTube is like my second passion. It's not, they're not like related. YouTube does not steal my time from game development. I mean, it technically does, but I want to, you know, spend my time making videos as well. That's what I'm trying to say. How about from the first line of code being typed to a somewhat rough but functioning prototype? That took a while. I mean, I can show you, I think. I guess I can. Hold on a second. Yeah, so this is the Git history of this project. This is the initial commit at the end of January. So I'd say layered layout, JSX was added here. So yeah, like up somewhere around here, I'd say playback controls. So it's been like, what, 22 days, something like that, 23 days, a month from when I started to when I had the first prototype that actually allowed me to play the animation. Where do you research ideas about your projects, the pixel renderer stuff and so on? I've never seen pixel being handled the way you do it. I don't know. I mean, there's... I don't know. I don't know how to answer this question. I'm trying to think about my thinking process when creating the pixel renderer. So I wanted a way to pixelate stuff in parallax, right? And I don't know, I just experimented with this. I don't think I've read about this anywhere. A lot of people then mentioned that quite a few retro games do that with like a single layer, that the first layer is, you know, rendered a little bigger and then offset it accordingly, which I had no idea about. It's like I reinvented the wheel, essentially. Is Rider worth switching to? I'm pretty sure I have a lifetime enterprise versus license from my university, but I've been kind of wanting to switch. I really like its integration with Unity. I'm not sure if you've ever seen how it works with Unity. I'm not going to show you right now because I'd have to start up Unity. I don't want to do that. But the integration with Unity, it's like it's native. You don't even need to install any plugins or anything like that with Rider. It just works, and it shows you if a given mono behavior is used in a scene, if so, in which scenes it is used. Same for events and whatnot. It's really, really useful. But I don't have comparison with Visual Studio because I've never used Visual Studio for Unity. So maybe Visual Studio is as good as Rider. Fleet is written in Kotlin, a bit of Rust for native parts, and the UI is written in Skia, however you pronounce that. So they're remaking the entire like IDE essentially. That's interesting. Does it mean that they're gonna switch in the future with like the rest. Visual Studio can attach to Unity, but it doesn't show a lot of metadata. It is still a good debugger though. Maybe I give it a try and see how I feel. Yeah, that's the best thing you can do, right? Just see for yourself. Yeah, with 20 years of experience of making IDE, they are making Fleet from scratch. VS Code is good, but Fleet is going to be better. I mean, we'll see, but hopefully it will be. But I have like, I remember, for instance, there's this program called Adobe XD for like, I don't know if you've heard about this. It's for like experience design. Wait, how do you call that? User experience. You know, for like designing UIs and whatnot. And it's been made from scratch. And I detest it with every part of my soul. And you'd think like, hey, Adobe, they have so much experience with like Photoshop, Illustrator, in design. Is that the name of the like UI design, UX design? Exactly. You'd think that they would create a, you know, amazing new, brand new software that's not, you know, kept back by the backward compatibility and whatever. So we'll see. I'm keeping my hopes in check. How long have we been streaming, by the way? Almost 2 hours. Oh my god. You would think that they would rewrite After Effects and Premiere too. Yeah, like I always thought that the reason After Effects is so like heavy and clunky is because all the like, you know, years of legacy code that they need to keep up with. But I recently tried to open one of my older projects using After Effects and it just doesn't open anymore. And I'm like, so what is it all for if there's no backward compatibility anymore? Or maybe there is, but it just doesn't work from time to time. Yeah. Okay, anyway, because we're not talking about anything currently. Again, I don't think I have anything else to show you. Or maybe I do. I'm trying to desperately like remind myself, even though I have a list. But no, I think that's everything. Hey Jacob, I'm a new patron, happy to be here. So impressed and inspired by all your work. Can't wait to see what you do next. Thank you very much. It's really nice of you to say. I am really excited by the next devlog. The next video will probably be a channel update because I need to make a channel update because there are a few things I want to talk about. But the next video about that, which hopefully is going to be also this month, is an amazing devlog. We're going back to Astortion and I cannot wait to show you something that I think it's interesting. Maybe it's not, but yeah. Do you think you'll make Astortion have a 2-player mode, like Portal co-op? No. This is one of these things that you need to account for from the very beginning of development. It's not really... I would be a scope creep if I would do that. Maybe after the release. something like that. But like from my perspective, I'd rather do it the way Portal did. So make Astortion and they make Astortion 2 and make it have like a co-op mode. But currently, no. I need to keep the project simple, you know. 2-player co-op is quite a lot of work. Astortion 2, exactly. Thank you for spending the time with those devlogs. I love making them. You don't need to thank me. It's so cool to like create them. Perhaps add more support one day. Let your fans make the multiplayer mode. Lol. It's an interesting idea. Definitely a lot of people were talking about a level editor, and I love this idea so much. But level editor is something that I'd like to add after the release. So release the game and then add like a free DLC containing the level editor. That's something that is doable from what I've researched. Astortion together. Sorry if I missed this, but do you have a full-time job still? No, I've been unemployed for the past week, actually. I talked about this a little bit before, and I'm gonna talk about this in more depth during the channel update. Probably like next week or next 2 weeks from now. Yeah, like I don't want to talk about this right now because I'm not prepared for this sort of conversation right now. Open source me the game. We want motion canvas as soon as possible. I'm trying, like, to get it out there as fast as possible. It's really, I'm really close to releasing it to my patrons, and then a month from there, it's gonna be available to everybody. Really glad your skinnable pixel art video got picked up by YouTube algorithm. You make very interesting videos and cover topics in great detail. Keep up the good work. First of all, thank you very much. Second of all, I don't want to lie to you. I kind of knew that this video is going to make numbers because for some reason, if you take a look at my main channel, whenever I put pixel art in the title, it always makes numbers. I should like do just it from now on. Just every single video, pixel art something, pixel art this, pixel art that. It's just like perfect. Guess we're reaching the end. Thanks so much for explaining your journey on Motion Canvas. Appreciate the tour and hope to see it available to public soon. See you on the next devlog. Goodbye. It was nice having you all. If you guys wanna tune out, you can totally do that. I'm probably not gonna talk about anything important from now on, so feel free to do that. I love your videos. I just discovered this secondary channel. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much. Pixel art in general is getting a sort of kick. Yeah, it does. It definitely does. Or it is. It definitely is. And I know how to speak English, I swear. Thanks for all the awesome work you do. See you on the next devlog. Yes, see you. Joined for the pixel art renderer, stayed for literally everything else. Thanks for making such an interesting videos. Thank you too for appreciating them. Have you ever worked on making something to improve your process that actually just was a waste of time? Probably, but I try to forget about that. And nothing comes to my mind right now, but definitely. And that's the beauty of YouTube videos, right? I only show you what I want you to see. You don't see all of my, mistakes and wasted hours doing something that's totally unnecessary. But that's definitely, that has definitely happened before. You built a lot of amazing tools to help your workflow, but I figured there has to be something that just didn't work out like you hoped. Yeah, but as I said, I'm trying to think about this, but there has to be. It's just like, it's, you know how you have an interview and they ask you about like your negative aspects of you, and you need to say something and you don't know what. I'm in this exact position right now, but there has to be something, right? Nobody's ideal, nobody's perfect. I mean, the whole, oh my god, I totally forgot about this. My first video about cutscenes, interactive cutscenes, this was a mistake. This was such a huge mistake. I scrapped the entire thing later on. Now I have typewriter and it's the main thing for making cutscenes and dialogues. But I had this devlog, really old devlog, about making characters like talk to each other in a cutscene. And I scrapped the entire thing because it wasn't working. My negative aspect is still watch Shrek. It's a very interesting piece of information. Yeah, so all right, I remember. I never talked about this. But yeah, that was a mistake. And I feel bad because people, I still get comments under this devlog from people like, oh, this is such an interesting idea. Like, I want to do something similar. Like, no, you don't. It was such a stupid idea. Because back then, I didn't know that you can create custom tools for Unity, and I was trying to kind of work with what Unity already had. So the like animator, editor, and timelines. I feel like this happens to me a lot, and just curious on how you decide it's time to build something rather than hard code or do all the steps. That's a difficult to answer question. It's more of like a, you know, how to say that? More of an intuition, I guess. Over-engineer everything. Exactly. It always works. All right, I feel like it's been 2 hours. Pretty good time. Quite a lot of people. Much more than last time. It's really nice. It was really nice having you here today. Thank you very much for, listening to my rambling. If you're going to do something more than once, it's worth making a tool to do it for you. Well, I've always heard that like it's 3 times. After the 3rd time is there. But yeah, it's the same thing. Anyway, thank you all so much for participating in this live stream. Hopefully it's better than the previous. Hopefully the next one's gonna be better than this one. At some point, they're gonna be actually good or something like that. Because I didn't say that. I haven't said this during this live stream. Yes, it's better. One quick thing. This is like a how to say that? Periodical thing. We're gonna have a live stream like this every single time the devlog is released. So after every single devlog, the next Saturday at the same hour, there's gonna be a live stream on this channel, just so you know, so that you can be prepared for that. I talked about this on the previous live stream, but I haven't mentioned this now. Occasional. It's like, but there's like a word for that when something happens periodically every single time. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean. When is the next devlog coming out? Wouldn't you like to know? I have no idea. I mean, I'm trying, because now I have the Patreon account, so I'm obligated to release at least one video a month, right? So you definitely can expect at least one video before the end of the month. But a specific date, I don't really know. Regular, maybe. That's simple. Now I have a reason to get up early on Saturdays. It's actually, I'm doing math in my head. What hour is it? It's actually 8 p.m. on my side. So, but people actually picked this hour. I don't know if you know, but there was like a community tab with a poll, and the majority of people, like 65%, I believe, picked this hour. It's 1 a.m. in GMT plus 7. Where is GMT plus 7? Plus is like, which direction is it? Is it west or east? Can I see that on a map? No, I don't want the time. Oh, here. Yeah, it's like the region of Australia has it really difficult, right? When it comes to live streams. It's like it's always the opposite. East, yeah, exactly. I need to experiment a bit with the settings of this live stream, because there's a way to configure the latency. I talked about this on the previous live stream as well. I'm currently on the low latency setting, but I feel like there's still quite a lot of latency between me and you, which is kinda can be a bit, jarring. I'm gonna try the ultra low latency next time. We'll see. The problem with it is that I cannot switch this during a live stream. Once the live stream is on, this option is, blocked. Okay, we are saying goodbye for real now. This is the last time. Yeah, it seems you don't get our messages for about 30 seconds or so. Yeah, exactly. I don't know why it's the case. It probably also depends from like person to person, right? Take care. Thank you very much. See you soon, guys. Hey, are you Polish? Yes, this is not a secret. You can see this on my About section. It's kind of a YouTube problem. That's why people use Twitch. Maybe we should switch to Twitch. Listen, I'm kind of afraid of switching to Twitch because I'm not well versed in terms of the Twitch etiquette. If that makes sense. Bye +1. Bye. Bye, Jacob. See you all. Okay. That's really cool. How long did you took to learn? It's difficult to say. I mean, Motion Canvas was, as I said already, created in front-end technologies, and this is something I specialize in. So it's like 7 years, I'd even say. You could stream in Discord. That's interesting idea. No, please stay on YouTube. Bye to everybody who's saying bye. And I need to end the live stream. I'm unnecessarily making it longer than it should be. Thank you very much. Finally, for the last time. Thank you very much for being here. It was a pleasure. We'll see each other in the next devlog. And bye-bye.